Good morning. This is Mission Control Houston bringing you live coverage this morning of the launch of the Russian Progress 74 cargo spacecraft, delivering almost 3 tons of food, fuel, and supplies to the International Space Station. You are looking live at Site 31 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, where a Soyuz 2.1A booster rocket stands fully fueled, ready to launch an unpiloted Russian resupply cargo spacecraft on a 3-day, 49-orbit journey to the International Space Station. The flight, as it always is for a Russian Progress or Soyuz vehicle, will be controlled once it reaches its preliminary orbit by flight controllers in the Russian Mission Control Center in the town of Korolyov on the outskirts of Moscow. The flight control team has been on console through the morning hours into the afternoon, monitoring all the preparations at the launch site in the Central Asian desert. Here in Mission Control Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, the Orbit 1 team of flight controllers has been on console into the early morning, working in tandem with the Russian flight control teams. The Orbit 1 team of flight controllers today is being led by Flight Director Rebecca Wingfield, joined on console to her right by Spacecraft Communicator or Capcom Jay Marsky. He'll be communicating with the crew on board the International Space Station today. Earlier this week, on Tuesday, the Progress spacecraft was transported to the launch pad from its processing hangar. The railroad car hauled the Progress vehicle about a quarter of a mile away to the launch site 31, where it was hydraulically lifted into its vertical position. Again, the Progress was hydraulically lifted into its vertical position, ready for launch where it stands today. Back in Baikonur, the skies are partly cloudy and the temperatures are around 33 degrees Fahrenheit. The 2.1A booster was fully fueled several hours ago, and all of the propellants are being replenished now as we are in the final minutes of the countdown that will lead to a launch at 3:34 and 11 seconds a.m. Central Time, which will be 2:34 and 11 seconds p.m. at the launch site in Baikonur. The Progress 74 cargo spacecraft is carrying 5,571 pounds, or 2.7 tons of cargo to the International Space Station. Within that cargo is 1,433 pounds of propellant, 110 pounds of oxygen, 926 pounds of water, and 3,014 pounds of spare parts and other supplies for the crew on board the International Space Station. Now about 15 minutes away from launch, and all of the preparations are still running smoothly for an on-time launch at 3:34 and 11 seconds a.m. Central Time. And again, that'll be 2:34 and 11 seconds p.m. at the Baikonur launch site. With the way orbital mechanics work, that launch time for any vehicle to reach the International Space Station is selected at the moment the Earth's rotation carries the launch site into the plane or corridor of the orbit of the International Space Station, which is inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. That's the way the phase angle and the launch time are calculated to bring the Progress to that 3-day, 49-orbit rendezvous it will enter to deliver 2.7 tons of cargo to the International Space Station. There are currently 6 crew members aboard the International Space Station. From left to right is NASA astronaut Andrew Morgan, Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Skvortsov, Expedition 61 Commander Luca Parmitano of the European Space Agency, Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Skrpochka, and NASA astronauts Jessica Meir and Christina Cook. Earlier this week on Monday, Parmitano and Morgan completed the third in a series of 4 spacewalks to make improvements to the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer, or AMS, in an effort to extend its life and support its mission to look for evidence of dark matter. The 2 astronauts successfully installed a new cooling system for the AMS, and the duo also completed an additional task to install an insulating blanket on the nadir side of the AMS to replace the heat shield and blanket removed during the first spacewalk to begin the work. The flight control team on Earth initiated power up and confirmed the new system is receiving power and data. Now approaching 13 minutes away from launch, and flight controllers are still reporting everything is running nominally for an on-time launch. Once the Progress 74 spacecraft lifts off this morning, it'll be a unique moment, as 2 cargo spacecrafts will both be en route to the International Space Station. Yesterday, the SpaceX Dragon resupply craft launched on a Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida, and is on track to arrive to the station for capture and berthing Sunday. Dragon will join 3 other spacecraft currently at the station before Progress arrives only 1 day later. The Progress is launching atop a Soyuz 2.1A booster, which is a 3-stage rocket. The first stage, with its liquid fuel engines and strap-on boosters, will burn for about 1 minute and 57 seconds before the strap-on boosters are jettisoned and the first stage separates. That'll be followed about 1 minute later by the jettisoning of the launch shroud. The second stage engine will burn for about 2.5 minutes to continue propelling the Progress towards its preliminary orbit. The second stage separation will occur at the 4-minute 47-second mark, followed by third stage, which will burn for a little over 4 minutes, and it's shut down at 8 minutes and 48 seconds. Followed just seconds later, Progress will separate from the third stage, and the initiation of the solar array and navigational deploys will happen. When Progress begins its 3-day 49-orbit journey, arriving to the space station on Monday, it'll dock to the Pirs Docking Compartment on the station's Russian segment at 4:38 a.m. Central Time, and that'll be 5:38 a.m. Eastern Time. One week ago today, the unpiloted Progress 73 cargo spacecraft undocked from the Pirs Docking Compartment, which opened up that docking compartment for Progress 74 to dock on Monday. Progress will remain docked to the station for more than 7 months, departing in July 2020 for its deorbit into the Earth's atmosphere. Now about 10 minutes out from launch, the International Space Station is flying 256 statute miles over Africa. Again, this is a live view at Site 31 of the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. That Soyuz 2.1A booster rocket is standing fully fueled, ready for launch. Now about 8.5 minutes out from launch, again, the Baikonur skies are partly cloudy and temperatures around 33 degrees Fahrenheit this morning. Coming up on the 7-minute mark before launch, again, all systems running nominally for an on-time launch this morning. Again, the Progress 74 cargo spacecraft is carrying 5,571 pounds or 2.7 tons of cargo to the International Space Station. And within that cargo is 1,433 pounds of propellant, 110 pounds of oxygen, 926 pounds of water, and 3,114 pounds of spare parts and other supplies for the crew on board the International Space Station. Back in the Russian Mission Control Center in the town of Koryov on the outskirts of Moscow, the flight control team has been on console through the morning hours into the afternoon, monitoring all the preparations at the launch site in the Central Asian desert. Now approaching 2.5 minutes from launch. Coming up on the 2-minute mark, the booster tank is now being pressurized for flight. That pressurization optimizes the flow of fuel and helps add structural support to the rocket. Again, the pressurization of the first stage fuel tanks will optimize the pressure of fuel, helping structural support of the rocket as it sits on the launch pad. Now under 1.5 minutes from launch, at this point the ground propellant feed has been terminated. Now coming up on the 1-minute mark. Now approaching 30 seconds till launch, the Soyuz rocket is now on internal power and we have auto sequence start. And the first umbilical tower has separated from the booster. And the launch command has been issued. The second umbilical tower has now separated. Engine command issued. Engines are up to flight speed. And liftoff. Liftoff of the 74th Progress resupply vehicle, now on its way to deliver 2.7 tons of cargo to the International Space Station. Everything reported nominal so far. The structures are nominal. 50 seconds into flight, crews are reporting good first stage performance. A minute and 15 seconds into flight, the Soyuz booster is passing through maximum dynamic pressure. Everything is operating nominally. Good structural parameters reported at the launch site. Standing by now for first stage separation. Good structural parameters still reported. First stage separation is confirmed. The 4 strap-on boosters have completed their job and dropped away at 29 miles in altitude. Second stage engine up and burning. This will be about 2 minutes and 39 seconds of a second stage performance. And with the Progress out of view, we'll go ahead and switch to the animation now. Coming up on the 3-minute mark into flight. Flight controllers are reporting everything is operating nominally. And confirmation of launch shroud jettison. The rocket's altitude now about 49 miles high, traveling at a speed of about 5,203 miles per hour. All of the vehicle parameters reported to be nominal. The Soyuz uses what's called a hot stage technique, so the third stage will actually ignite while the second is still burning. And this is the view from the external second stage camera. Everything's still reported to be nominal. Now a little over 4.5 minutes into the flight, and all of the vehicle parameters reported to be nominal. And second stage separation is confirmed. The third stage engine is up and running, everything looking good, now traveling just over 9,500 miles per hour and 100 miles in altitude. Now at the 5-minute mark into flight. Now being propelled by the single engine of the Soyuz's third stage, the engine will thrust and burn for about 4 minutes and 2 seconds. All systems reported to be nominal. Now coming up on the 6-minute mark into flight. All systems still reported to be nominal, coming up on the 6-minute and 30-second mark into flight. Six minutes and 30 seconds into flight, third stage engine still burning nominally as the Progress heads toward its preliminary orbit on its journey to the International Space Station. Coming up on the 7-minute mark, all systems reported to be nominal. And we have 1 minute and 45 of powered flight remaining. Seven and a half minutes into flight, the Progress and Soyuz now traveling 14,000 miles per hour, 124 miles in altitude. The trajectory is flattening out, and we have about 1 minute of powered flight remaining. Now at the 8-minute mark into flight since the Progress lifted off, the Progress and Soyuz now traveling almost 15,000 miles per hour and 125 miles in altitude. All structural parameters still reported to be nominal. Now standing by for third stage shutdown and spacecraft separation. Third stage separation confirmed. And getting reports now that the solar arrays and antennas have deployed. The Progress 74 resupply spacecraft now officially in its preliminary orbit, which begins its 3-day journey to the International Space Station to deliver 2.7 tons of cargo. Recapping the milestones from today, liftoff occurred on time at 3:34 a.m. Central Time, which was 2:34 p.m. at the launch site in Baikonur. The Soyuz 2.1A booster lifted off from Site 31 in Baikonur and performed a series of 3 nominal burns to propel the Progress into its preliminary orbit where it is now. And getting our first view now from the Progress 74 camera. This is the first test of the telemetry stream you see on your screen now from the Progress 74 back to the control center in Korolyov, where the Russian flight controllers now begin their work to follow the journey of the Progress 74 to the International Space Station. Again, the Progress 74 is officially on its 3-day 49-orbit journey to the space station, where it will dock to the Pirs Docking Compartment on Monday, December 9th. There are officially 2 cargo resupply vehicles en route to the station now. The SpaceX Dragon resupply craft lifted off yesterday, carrying more than 5,700 pounds of cargo, and is on track to arrive to the station Sunday morning. We'll have live coverage of rendezvous and docking starting at 3 a.m. Central, 4 a.m. Eastern, then back on air about 2 hours later for installation coverage starting at 6:30 a.m. Central, 7:30 a.m. Eastern. Dragon will join 3 other spacecraft currently at the station before Progress arrives only 1 day later. Then on Monday, December 9th, the Progress 74's 3-day 49-orbit journey to deliver 2.7 tons of cargo will end its journey docking to the Pirs Docking Compartment, and will bring you live coverage of docking beginning at 3:45 a.m. Central, 4:45 a.m. Eastern. Now, with Progress 74 safely on its way to the International Space Station, that'll wrap up our coverage for today. This is Mission Control Houston.